Good afternoon, citizens, and welcome back to the Leo Dotson Show. Hey, today I want to talk to you about four bills in your U.S. Congress that as of spring of 2012 are either the law of the land today or are in the process of becoming the law of the land. The oldest one, and most of you are probably already aware of, is the Patriot Act, which was signed about 8 years ago in the wake of 9/11. Of course, people say, well, we have to be able to find Al-Qaeda or be able to do research and intelligence investigations to be able to find people who want to do harm, and that makes sense. But the problem is, if you read the Patriot Act, which is brilliantly named, right? I mean, how can you be against the Patriot Act? What, are you not a patriot? Well, my friends, there's absolutely nothing patriotic about repealing the Fourth Amendment. And if you read this and not listen to the politicians and their promises, which they rarely keep in any event, if you read the Patriot Act and what it says, it absolutely eliminates the Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment is about due process, probable cause. If the government, through whatever its wings, the Army, the police, judicial system, thinks that there's a wrongdoing taking place or has taken place and they want to find evidence, they have to get a warrant, a sworn affidavit that describes the exact person they're looking for and what it is they hope to find. They can't just burst into your house and do a witch hunt or a wild goose chase and hope they turn up something. That's not a free society. That's a communist dictatorship. That's Nazi Germany. Hopefully that's not the United States of America, but since the passing of the law of the land, the Patriot Act, which should have been repealed right now, since then, last year in 2011 there was a movement to repeal it. They didn't. They kept it in place. Read it. It absolutely eliminates any probable cause that there is. They can just search you for anything that they want. Now, of course, what everyone's going to say is, well, if you have nothing to hide, why are you worried? Well, that's exactly what Hitler said. That's exactly what the Nazi stormtroopers in Germany in World War II said. Is that what we want to be like? And the answer is, it's none of your business what I have to hide. I'm a free citizen. If I'm not doing anything wrong that you can prove through, then get a warrant and check it out. Otherwise, leave me alone. That's called a free government. That's what I have to hide. Or I don't want to have to hide my civil liberties. I don't want to be searched every time I turn around to see what someone can turn up. The next one is SOPA. Again, beautifully named, well marketed, stands for Stop Internet Piracy Act. There's also a counterpart to that legislation called PIPA, which is Protect IP Act. Again, both of those sound very helpful, very mundane, and very benign. But here's what happens right now. Let's say that the government supposes that there's some illegal activity going on a website, for example, some pirated content, where the people who produce that content aren't getting paid or it's being used in a way that they wouldn't want it used. Well, the government or whatever body sees that potential alleged crime, they would issue a cease and desist order or to remove the content or make whatever representations that needed to be made at the time. And that entity, the people who own the website or run the website, would then adjust that accordingly. Or if they didn't think there was any wrongdoing, they would put an argument together and submit it back to the initial authority saying, hey, we're not doing anything wrong for these following points. And then, if they couldn't come to some agreement, there would be a trial, and they would find out, the evidence would be set forth in that trial, and it would determine whether it was illegal content or not, and whether it would need to be removed or not. That's normal way we've done business, that we've checked into allegations since the beginning of our country in 1776 and our Constitution in 1787, which was ratified in 1788, until this legislation of SOPA. SOPA says that any website the government even suspects of any kind of illegal activity, whether it's counterfeit content or pirated content, they can just go in on their own and shut it down. No trial, no investigation whatsoever. Again, that's a communist dictatorship country. It's not a free society. Now, do you really think that the government is worried about my copyright infringements or your copyright infringements or your pirated software? Or do you think they're worried about the information that you and I can get that they can't get to the local media? And I don't know if you understand this or not, and hopefully many of you are learning all the time of what's going on behind the scenes, but the people like Rupert Murdoch, who own huge media outlets, if you really, we're sitting here playing kindergarten games, Democrats getting mad at Republicans or Republicans getting mad at Democrats. Meanwhile, the people that own the media, they give you little silly articles. They don't talk about this for the most part in the media. If they do, they quickly brush it under the rug. Oh, it's no big deal. But it is a big deal. They can just go shut websites down, especially the ones that talk about what's going on with your government. They just shut them down because of whatever they want to say when there's nothing wrong with them at all. It gives them a media to shut anything they want down. And then where do you get information? Then you have to go back to the media that are controlled by a few people. Here's what happens in the United States today. You don't hear information about these infringements of the Bill of Rights, I call them the Bill of Wrongs, that are happening, and that actually affects your life every single day. The freedoms you think you have, that you should have, that you've been guaranteed, that every single executive, congressman, legislator, or anyone serving the judicial branch of the federal government or any of the 50 state governments on all levels have to swear an oath, not to God or to a particular religion, but to uphold the Constitution. And when they make laws like this, they've just violated their oath, which to me is grounds for dismissal at the very least, if not impeachment or stronger proceedings. But that doesn't happen because we're not a mobilized group against the people who are the leaders who are affecting the masses. And here's some other things that are going on. What happens is when you and I get in arguments about Democrat or Republican, when they own them both and tell them both what to do, the huge billionaires and literally trillionaires who own these politicians, who contribute billions of dollars to the Republican candidate and to the Democratic candidate, who they don't care who wins because they own them both, they control them both. The laws are made for those wealthy people. And the more that they can eliminate the Bill of Rights, which gives power to the people, the more power and control they have. It's pretty much that simple. And if the more you see of these laws, the more you see these bills that are introduced with bipartisan support. I mean, we can't get our Congress to agree on, certainly not balancing the budget. We can't even get them to agree on giving support and setting up a fund for cancer patients, for people who are responders of 9/11. We can't even get our Congress to get together to take care of our veterans. And we can't even get them to keep from destroying our country with more and more debt. But I'll be damned if they sure can't get together and pass these bills that destroy our Bill of Rights 97-3, unanimously. When's the last time you saw a bill go through Congress that went through unanimously, or 97-3? Kind of funny how they find to have bipartisan support on those types of things, isn't it? Here's another one, H.R. 37, or the counterpart in the Senate, which is Senate S 1794. It's called the Trespass Bill, colloquially, but the real name of it is, and listen to this, the Federal Restricted Buildings and Grounds Improvement Act. That sounds very benign, almost sounds like they're doing some landscaping. You know what it is? It makes a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison for anyone, not even willfully, just knowingly, protesting, your First Amendment right, by the way, protesting. Now, you can go protest the dog catcher, I guess, or the city mayor, but you can't protest anyone who has Secret Service protection, would include the President, the Vice President, all members of Congress, the Supreme Court, on and on and on. What about Ahmadinejad? Remember, he came to New York. I was there a couple of years ago at Columbia University, and there were huge protests against him. Why, if I were him, I probably would have asked for Secret Service protection, and many foreign dignitaries coming to the United States get Secret Service protection. What if we protest against them? Do you know, by doing so, we're taking our lives in our own hands, that they could arrest us for a felony, simply by politically, peaceably protesting, just saying, hey, we don't agree with this policy or that policy. Well, if we get too close to, and I'm not talking about, in any arm's distance to harm anyone, but if we get in a particular area that we're not supposed to get, the Secret Service, any member of the government, can arrest us for a felony for simply saying we disagree with something. That's a communist country. And the other one is the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012. It has a lot of articles in it, as you might suspect. Part of it buried in there is indefinite detention, meaning any person they suspect, the government suspects, no proof, suspects of being a terrorist, harboring terrorists, supporting terrorists, being associated with terrorists, you could know someone you don't even know is doing anything wrong, and by definition, you're associated with that person. You can now be arrested and held indefinitely without access to an attorney, without access to a trial, without any defense, without even knowing what your crime is. They can hold you in prison literally forever if they want to. Those are things that communist dictatorships do. Those are things that third world militia coup d'etat leaders do. Those are things they did to Nelson Mandela simply for being a political dissident. And now that could potentially happen in the U.S. Now, of course, they're going to tell you, and their wording is, "Oh, we would never do this against the United States, a United States citizen." And that sounds good, but read it. There are certain clauses, and I'm no attorney, but attorneys who have read this says there are certain situations where a U.S. citizen could be held indefinitely. It's a very scary proposition. These things absolutely are in violation of the Bill of Rights and our Constitution. This doesn't go on in a free society, yet it is. And you know what? It gets swept under the rug. We're so busy, when you watch things on TV, you're either watching one network, which is spun to the right and a political talking point for the Republican Party, one which is predominantly left, a few others that are kind of in the center, but they all tell the same story. And they're busy talking about contraception, which is ridiculous to even have that conversation in 2012. They're talking about who is a better dog owner, with one's petting his dog on the White House lawn, the other one's got it strapped on top of the car. What's the perfect height for trees in Michigan? All these trivial, ridiculous, bullshit articles and topics we're discussing, while this stuff, which is violating our freedoms and our Bill of Rights and destroying our Constitution, goes for the most part unnoticed, or certainly it doesn't get much national attention. This has to change. And what I want to ask you is a very serious question. Do we want to be subjects of kings and rulers? That's where we're headed. Or do we really want to be free citizens who control our elected public servants? That's the way we were set up, but we're getting away from that. I'm reminded of the words of Benjamin Franklin, a very wise man who looked at history before him and hoped it didn't happen to us in the future, who said, the person who gives up their liberty in exchange for temporary liberty ends up with neither, and they deserve neither. And that's what's happening. We're giving up freedom because every time we see one of these bills that are being posted, we go, "Oh, well, that's okay. I heard the politician," of course, they're not going to lie to you, right? Tell us that it was just for our safety. Have we become a nation of cowards? We'll give up our freedoms because, "Oh, we're scared. Please protect us." I thought we were the land of the free and the home of the brave. Over 600,000 people in our nation's armed forces who on all of our wars have died. They didn't die for politicians. They didn't die even for the cloth of the flag. They died for what it stood for and what the Constitution stands for, which is freedom and liberty for all of us. And we're just giving it away to the powers that be. We've got to stand up for our own freedoms, because if we don't, who is? The people who are elected to stand up for our freedoms are the very ones pushing laws through that violate every one of our Bill of Rights. It's really disgusting. It's a sickening time. But we've got to unite, and we've got to get over this partisan silliness, this kindergarten arguments between Democrats and Republicans, and realize it's the masses, us citizens, we the people, against their elected leaders who are not doing their job and are not adhering to the oath they swore to uphold the Constitution. And actually, in the antithesis of that, they're destroying it. My question is, what are we going to do?